now we have the influx of ghost guns, which is going to create even a bigger issue. So I wanted to talk about this today, like I said, to kind of give a wake up call, if you will, to get this information out, because I think, at least from a lot of the research that I've done, many people might not know just how many of these guns are being manufactured. This is no longer a small problem. Like, there's a huge amount of ghost guns floating throughout the country. Voice. Welcome back. Welcome back. This is the People's Voice. I am Trey Evans, and I am the People's Voice. Thank you again for checking out the podcast this week. As always, it is greatly appreciated. As always, thank you to everyone who is a returning listener. We appreciate your support. Of course, we always say thank you to the new listeners. Anytime someone picks up the show and finds out about the podcast, I am grateful for that. And hopefully we can fulfill the time that you've allocated today to listen to this, and we can provide you with some interesting information that can be shared in your community, amongst your family, and within your network. And we also ask that when you do share that information, please subscribe to the podcast. That way you can be notified when we provide information and a new episode. And then new episodes drop every Friday. Every Friday we put out a new episode of the People's Voice podcast. And we put out a new video every Friday at 3 p.m. on YouTube. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Today, let me change the tone a little bit. Today, I want to talk about guns and the proliferation of guns in America. And not just guns. I want to specifically talk about today ghost guns. And I want to talk about this because, once again, we've had another mass shooting in the United States, which is unfortunately becoming quite common, right? So this is not a anomaly. But I want to talk I want to talk specifically about ghost guns today, because that is becoming an increasingly bigger problem in the United States than I think is being talked about. And so I want to talk a little bit about what that is. I'm going to obviously explain what ghost guns are for those who may not know. I had a vague understanding of it, but obviously doing some research for the show, I have a better understanding. But I want to talk about that. I want to talk about, some of the areas and, what's happening out there with ghost guns. And then, of course, talk about some ways that possibly what can be done to at least bring some regulation to the market. Because as I start to talk about this, you'll kind of hear how really, literally, it is the wild, wild west when it comes to these ghost guns. So that's what I want to talk about today, ghost guns here in the United States. So in order to do that, I want to make sure we are all on the same page. So what I'm going to do is give a definition of what a ghost gun is, and then I will go from there. So again, I was doing some research and wanted to kind of get a definition of what a ghost gun is. Found an article here on NPR, and they did a great piece on ghost guns and how they're manufactured and what are the rules around it. But in that, they also did provide a definition for ghost guns. So I want to talk about that. So what is a ghost gun? Okay, what is a ghost gun? And as is defined here on NPR, says ghost guns are firearms that are privately assembled and untraceable. They can be assembled by, a kit, which is called a buy, build, shoot kit that can be literally purchased online on any, eBay and all these other type of sites. It's not, you don't have to go to the dark web for this. And, or they can be printed through 3D printers. And, 3D printers, if you don't know, literally are printers that can create three-dimensional objects from the printer. It's a 3D printer, so literally you can build anything you can think of with a 3D printer. I don't want to go too much into 3D printers, but you can build amazing things with 3D printers, and they've become very affordable. When they first came out a few years ago, they were extremely high in terms of pricing, but now they are very affordable. But anyway, let me get back. So ghost guns are firearms that are privately assembled and untraceable. They can be assembled by from buy, build, shoot kits, which are literally kits that can be shipped to you and you can put the gun together, or they can be manufactured by 3D printers. Unlike other guns, these weapons do not have serial numbers, and that's the key part about this, and that's where the ghost part comes in. Because, sometimes when you might hear that phrase, think ghost gun, you think, man, what is that, a play gun? No, it's a real gun, real firearm, and can kill people just like a standard manufactured gun. Excuse me, but the difference is that they don't have serial numbers, and so they're untraceable, right? So now, of course, if you are someone who does not want to have your gun registered with the government, this is a perfect opportunity. B, if you're a criminal, this is more than a perfect opportunity, right? Because that is how many times crimes that have involved guns are solved, right? They can trace the gun back to either the original owner and so on and so forth. But anyway, that is what ghost guns are. Ghost guns are firearms that are privately assembled and untraceable. So the reason I wanted to talk about this today is because, like I said, there has been another shooting, but this shooting that took place did not involve a ghost gun. But what made me want to talk about this today is that in New York City, there was recently a bust of a gang of basically a gang. I don't know how I was trying to think how else am I going to explain it, but basically a gang in New York was busted or taken down. And I'm reading an article here from New York One which is a station in New York City. And they're kind of going through what the bus involved. The thing that stood out to me is that basically they took down over, I think it was like 29, almost really they arrested over 30 people that were involved in this gang. But again, the thing that caught my attention was that they also confiscated 34 guns in this raid or in this takedown of the gang. But within the 34 guns, they say 2 of the guns were ghost guns, right? So that was the thing that caught my attention, because I'm like, now we're starting to see the influence of ghost guns getting into the hands of criminals at the street level. Because again, like I told you, a lot of these guns, these ghost guns that can be manufactured, they cost a little bit of money. And most times you have to purchase these materials through legal means. The fact that they are now getting to the street level amongst gang members and other criminals is a huge red flag. Matter of fact, let me play this clip from Mayor Eric Adams of New York City. He talked about this on an interview late last year, and specifically about what ghost guns, how ghost guns are affecting the city, and some of the things that he would like to see done from a national standpoint. But let me play this clip, and then I'll continue from there. But I thought what he had to say was pretty interesting.
Why aren't the laws working?
For a number of reasons. We have a small number of gun dealers that are just skating the law. We're dealing with a problem with ghost guns. It's imperative that we come up with clear messages around ghost guns and the kits that assembles them. And I believe Washington is going to do that. Then we need to put money into the ATF so they can do the proper information sharing, so we can identify the flow of guns in the inner cities. And that is what we're doing in New York with our combined efforts of all law enforcement agencies.
It sounds like you're...
And, I wanted to play that because obviously New York City is not only one of the more famous cities in the world, but is a huge metropolis. And the fact that the mayor, who's only been in office, I think, less than probably a year now at this point, has already identified that it is becoming a huge issue in the city, is also one of the reasons why I wanted to talk about ghost guns today, because the manufacturing of the guns are untraceable many times. And what you are finding is that you have, as the mayor said, smaller gun dealers, right? Individuals who are making these guns in their homes, and then they are now selling them to criminal elements. Now, I know there are people that will hear this that, are manufacturers that use 3D printing, and it may come off as criminalizing this activity. What I'm trying to do is point out is that we have a problem that is right on the verge of becoming uncontrollable, right? We already have a huge issue in the United States regarding guns just in general, right? Just guns that are manufactured through various gun manufacturers that are, all over our streets and in the hands of individuals, not just criminals, but also law-abiding citizens as well. Now we have the influx of ghost guns, which is going to create even a bigger issue. So I wanted to talk about this today, like I said, to kind of give a wake-up call, if you will, to get this information out, because, I think, at least, from a lot of the research that I've done, many people might not know just how many of these guns are being manufactured. This is no longer a small problem. Like, there's a huge amount of ghost guns floating throughout the country. Matter of fact, I was reading a stat here. This is from everytownsearch.org, and they did a study. And in the study, they noted here that, and I'm reading directly from their site, it says the number of ghost guns recovered by law enforcement in the U.S. has increased at an alarming rate. They say between 2016 and 2020, the amount of ghost guns increased by 398%. These are guns that have been confiscated by law enforcement. So this means that they have engaged with someone who has been involved in some level of criminal activity. They've taken the gun away. 398% increase between 2016 and 2020. That's 3 years ago. So there's no telling where the number is at now. And it also said during that same period that law enforcement confiscated 24,000 ghost guns across the country within a 5-year period. We have a huge issue, and I want to get this information out because obviously this information needs to get from the voices of myself and others to those who are responsible for manufacturing the parts, selling the parts for ghost guns, and obviously to the lawmakers who are refusing in many instances to even do anything about legal guns that are being manufactured. But now we have ghost guns being manufactured, and there's really not much that's being done about it. Matter of fact, let me play another piece because Vice News did a piece on this last year, and they sat down with a gun manufacturer, and he basically said, I can create as many guns as I want, and the government won't be able to do anything about it. Let me play this, and then we'll continue from there. So it's amazing.
The government has no idea that you made this gun and have it in your home right now.
I try to keep everything as legal and open and public as possible because I love the sharing of the information. But if I wanted to print it and didn't want anyone to know about it, no. Printer's not connected to the internet. Nothing else would really indicate to anyone else that it's here. So,
and that's the problem. Not only is the gun that's produced untraceable, right? But then you also have the issue of the individuals that have made the gun. There is no way to trace it back to them because, again, and in this case, we're talking about an individual who has used a 3D printer to create a gun. But in this case, there's no way to trace this back to him because the printer that he used is not even connected to the internet. There's no serial number that can be traced back. So again, we have a huge problem with ghost guns, and this needs to be addressed. So I wanted to also talk about from a regulatory standpoint. Again, there is no national law banning this as yet. That's number one. Number two is that you only have a handful of the 50 states that actually have any type of regulation regarding ghost guns. Again, I'm looking at a graph here from, again, everytownsearch.org, and they did a great piece, let's give them credit, on ghost guns in states that do or don't have regulation. And I'm literally looking at a map that they have, and of course, I'll share this information on my post, but they literally have a map here, and there's only 11 out of the 50 states that have regulations regarding ghost guns. And those states are New York, Rhode Island, New Jersey, Connecticut, Maryland, Delaware, Illinois, Washington State, Nevada, California, and Hawaii. The rest of the country has no regulation at all regarding ghost guns, which means that if you are in one of these other states, you can create a ghost gun, sell it, and there's really no penalty or any law that's going to prevent you from doing that. And each state has a different regulation, or has different regulations regarding ghost guns. So even though those 11 states that I just mentioned have regulations for the manufacturing and selling of ghost guns, each of them have different regulations. So for instance, in California, it says that ghost guns have to have serial numbers and background checks have to be done for the components before they could be sold, and all ghost guns have to be reported to officials, right? That's in California. But then you go to, let's say, Illinois. Illinois says, well, you got to have serial numbers and background checks for all firearms and components, but you don't have to report anything to government officials. And it just goes on and on and on in terms of the states that allow it. In New York, they have a regulation where, again, serial numbers and background checks have to be done. They say all ghost guns have to be reported to officials. But in New York, they also say that no plastic undetectable guns can be manufactured, because a lot of times these guns are made by plastic. And I know it's blowing people's mind, but literally the gun itself can be made of plastic, and that's from the trigger and the handle. And then they'll add other components to it, maybe other metal components to deal with different heat levels and things of that nature. But in New York, they're saying that no plastic can be manufactured in these guns. I'm talking about this again because this started when I read this article about the gang that got taken down in New York City, 30 plus individuals. They confiscated 34 guns, and 2 of those guns are ghost guns. So that immediately was an alarm to me, because I'm saying, well, if the ghost guns are starting to get to the hands of criminals, we have a huge problem, because we have no regulation in most states. And we also have these guns getting into the hands of individuals that have bad intentions. Now, let me just be on board. I am not against firearms or ownership of firearms, responsible ownership of firearms, responsible manufacturing and selling of firearms. I am against firearms that are being put into certain areas of the country that are now getting into the hands of those who have ill intent. I'm dead set against that and very clear about that. So just wanted to make that. But again, this is, I wanted to talk about the regulation in each of the states. Again, there's only 11 states that outlaw, that have regulations about ghost guns. And then the other, 40 plus states, it's basically the wild, wild west. So you can manufacture the gun, sell the gun, and it's untraceable. So, it's kind of like, good luck, thank you for the transaction, and go on about your business. So regulation has to be enacted. So what has been done? Let's talk about that a little bit, because I do want to talk about that. So there, again, as I just read, there are certain states that are having these conversations and starting to put these laws into place. But again, the challenge is that, and I'm reading an article here from NPR.org. It says privately made firearms is an emerging issue based on an ATF official, but law enforcement agencies are just beginning to establish training on how to identify and recognize these guns, because, in some of these guns, they're made so well that law enforcement officials can't even make the distinction between what's real and what's not. So the first thing that has to occur is training for law enforcement to be able to identify these guns. Second, you have to mandate that these guns have to have traceable serial numbers and have to be notified, and officials have to be notified that they're being made. And then third, you're going to have to make the penalties for illegal guns being, I shouldn't say illegal guns, for ghost guns being manufactured and then sold without notification, without serial numbers, traceable serial numbers. You're going to have to make the penalties for that extremely high to try to curve some of these issues with these guns getting to the streets. Because again, the problem is that it's gone from, hey, we can make these guns look to now being sold and now getting into the hands of individuals who are seeking these type of weapons, if you will, because again, it's untraceable. And, if you're a criminal, if you're, intending to commit a crime, this is probably something that you will definitely look for. So I think those are the three things. Obviously, I'm always talking about, connecting with your local, state, and federal designated politicians, because unfortunately, a lot of these decisions in terms of what type of laws can be enacted have to be either created or passed by them. But obviously, individual citizens have a difficult time being able to just, curve this, because if you're not manufacturing, if you're a manufacturer and you're trying to be responsible about it, then, maybe you can curve it from that standpoint. But as an individual citizen, unfortunately, we have to depend on lawmakers to create laws that make it mandated that these guns are being manufactured with traceable serial numbers, and that they are being notified by the manufacturers of them that they've created them, and then that they've sold them as well. So all very important information, but I wanted to talk about that today because it just blew my mind, the number of ghost guns that are out on the streets today, and or the number of ghost guns, I should say, that are being manufactured that will eventually end up on the streets. It's definitely an emerging issue, and so I wanted to get on the forefront of that and notify you guys. And as always, you can share that information so everyone in your community, your family, and your network can be aware of it. And collectively, if we work together, we can possibly at least get some regulation in these states that are not regulating ghost guns. So that is what I wanted to talk about today. As always, if this information is enlightening, please share and subscribe. If you want to comment, you can leave a comment at any of the social platforms. You can reach me at I am Trey Evans on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. You can also reach us at the People's Voice Podcast on Instagram. So that is my time for today. As always, dreams are not just for sleeping. Please wake up and live your dreams. My name is Trey Evans, the People's Voice. Tell somebody about the dream. Salute. The People's Voice.